side by side.
Here comes Chase Elliott now. Martin Truex Jr. has made a move and gotten to the outside. Can he hang on to that position? He's going to move Elliott back to second.
Martin Truex Jr. has done a masterful job all afternoon long. Off turn 11 one more time, very smoothly. I think the clock may have just run out for Kyle Busch.
Once again, the king of the road here at Sonoma Raceway is Martin Truex Jr.
Oh, yeah, baby! You are the man. Kissing that possum today.
Well, welcome to NASCAR America. The Mayor, Jeff Burton, Hall of Famer Dale Jarrett. I'm Steve Letarte. Guys, another road course race in the books and another dominating performance by Martin Truex. I think we're starting to see some consistency at the road courses. You're going to have to beat Martin Truex.
Yeah, he and his team, they've got it figured out. Every time we go to a road course, he's in contention. If he doesn't win, something happens, or he always seems to have himself in a position. He's turned into the guy. He's the road course ringer right now.
Yeah. In our day, it was Jeff Gordon we had to try to beat and do that, and we couldn't, most of us. And so, but Truex, I don't think that we ever look and think about that. You know, we talked for the longest time that he couldn't win on a short track or hadn't, and then the plate races and stuff. But he's had no problem navigating around these road courses. Just outstanding job in every single way. Doesn't make a mistake, takes care of his tires and his equipment, and has everything there ready at his disposal when it comes time to win.
And why the race ended up being relatively uneventful as far as caution goes, which I think helped Cole Pearn stick with his strategy, there was this air of confidence from this 19 team. I spent some time with Cole last week. He felt good about going to Sonoma, and he reminded me, shame on me for not knowing this, he led up into the last corner of the Roval, where he ended up getting in an accident, finished second to Chase Elliott at Watkins Glen, has won a handful of Sonomas. Before that, they blew up leading Sonoma. When he started laying out their road course resume, it was no surprise to me why they were confident. But it really isn't just Sonoma in my mind. When we started the year, we talked a lot about Team Penske and Kyle Busch. And Martin Truex Jr. was making that transition to Joe Gibbs Racing. And I'm not sure what it was, whether it was the rules or whether it was the new shop or what it was. But starting with Richmond, which was his first win at Joe Gibbs Racing, he's won 4 of the last 8, led over 500 laps. I mean, something has clicked. Like I said, whether it's the rules, the rules package, or the comfort of Joe Gibbs Racing and Cole Pearn understanding who to talk to, now it's more Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. than Joe Gibbs, Team Penske.
Yeah, Martin Truex Jr. and Cole Pearn, they just do a great job together. And there's times that you put two people together in the right situation and they just hit it off. And I think Martin Truex Jr., I think he's the perfect example of someone who, had a career, solid career, but nothing great, and you team him up with somebody that he gets along with really well, that understands what Martin Truex needs to do, and he goes and makes stuff happen. If you look at what he's done lately, in 10 years, he won 3 races. In 10 years, won 3 races. And everybody's kind of like, Martin's okay, but look at what he's done in the last 4 Cup seasons. Martin Truex Jr. has 20 wins. Kyle Busch, 21. He has more wins than Kevin Harvick. Until you look at that, we don't realize it. I don't think that Martin Truex Jr. gets enough credit for how good he is. He has more wins than everybody but Kyle Busch. And if this year continues, when this year ends, he will have more wins than Kyle Busch in the last 4 years. You have to put the right people together. Timing matters. Opportunity matters. People would have given up on Martin Truex Jr. If you looked at what he had done in those 10 years, people would have given up on him. They didn't give up on him. He got that opportunity. He capitalized on it, and now he's the guy you're going to have to beat for this championship.
Yeah, and I'll say that, going back to your point, not sure if it was going to Gibbs and the new surroundings there, or was it the rules? I think it had more to do with the rules and just figuring out exactly what they needed, how they could give Martin what he was looking for in the feel of the car, and understanding how to race with that situation. But it's that graphic that we just showed with those 20 wins that now makes Martin Truex Jr. a Hall of Famer. He will be in the Hall of Fame. He's won a championship. You put up numbers like that. I'm somebody that can identify with this because when I came into the sport, things were okay. Won a couple of races with Joe Gibbs, but it was getting paired up with Todd Parrott at Robert Yates Racing with the second car that when I made my career, because I was surrounded with good people, Todd knew what I needed. And so I can understand this. And I really appreciate the way Martin goes about this in the way that he doesn't have to tell everybody how good he is. He lets his driving do the job. He goes out, gets the job done. He shows his displeasure if he gets pushed around a little too much, like we saw last year at Martinsville. But he's solid at every type of track that you would want him to be. And again, that's why I fully believe that whenever his career is over, and he's got a lot more racing to do and a lot more wins to come, but he will be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
That was going to be my follow-up. How can he have 20 races in the last 3 years and be off the radar? Because arguably he is. I would have, if you would have asked me that question, and I have been to a majority of these races, watched them all, I would have probably had him behind Harvick, somewhere down with Brad Keselowski, Joe Logano in that range, and I would have been completely wrong. How is that possible for a guy that his resume says completely the opposite?
Because he didn't come in and just knock you over with success. It took him a while to do it. So when you think about Martin Truex Jr., he just doesn't come to mind. But, you know, you've paired him up now in the same organization as Kyle Busch. And Kyle Busch is a guy that everybody points to and says he's the best driver on the racetrack. Is he?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you look at numbers and you look what's going on this year and equipment that's very similar, you can make the argument that Martin Truex Jr. is better than Kyle Busch. So, you know, but it's simply because, in my opinion, now he won a lot of Xfinity races. Before he went Cup racing, he won a lot of Xfinity races. But, you know, in 10 years, 3 wins. You know, that does not get you thinking that's one of the best drivers. You know what I mean? So you have to look at what he's done the last 4 years to really get that sense of how good he's been.
Well, how about 16 races, 4 wins, because that's what he's done this year, and so hasn't his teammate. And I think that's the new conversation. Where it was Joe Gibbs versus Team Penske, it looks like an internal battle currently, because even at Sonoma, as good as the 19 car was, it was his teammate, the 18 of Kyle Busch, is who he had to beat to win the race.
Sucks to finish second to a teammate, but it's good for the company. So overall, you know, Martin's really, really good here. So I'm just pumped that I actually ran good here.
You know, we have that mutual respect where we can, you know, we know we're both fast. We both have great teams. We can push each other to be better, and it really elevates the whole company. So we race hard as we can possibly race on the racetrack, and respect each other off it. It works out pretty good.
You know, rookies coming into the sport these days is the fact that you got guys, you know, that are at the top of the sport that are always trying to get better themselves. So it's, you know, I think that about Kyle Busch. I think that about Denny Hamlin. I mean, they're trying to get better all the time. And, you know, when those guys continue to improve, you got to do the same.
And the way they work together is really, to me, in our meetings, it's fascinating. Everybody shares everything. Those guys, I'm telling you, they share everything about the race car, how they drove it, and everything. It's kind of amazing to see.
They told me in Victory Lane that we finished 1-2 7 times, and I beat him 4 out of 7, so I got the upper hand right now. I didn't know. I had no idea until they told me that. So, no, we don't. I don't keep track of it. I don't know if he does or not. He might.
Well, this organization's reminded me, I was fortunate enough to be a part of Hendrick Motorsports in 2007, finished 1-2 in the points, won 18 races, and through Sonoma, in that same year, Hendrick Motorsports had won 10 races. Well, this is Joe Gibbs Racing's 10th win of the season. What I also remember about that 07 lineup is, as good as Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson worked together, remember Jeff hired Jimmy, there were some testy moments. There was not all good conversation in the media center. There was a few fenders banged on the racetrack. So the question for me is, they use the word respect. Can they continue to play nice and have the respect as they kind of separate themselves from the field?
I think they can, as long as they avoid altercation, right? As long as the teams, you know, it doesn't take much. You can light that fire pretty easily, you know, get blocked on pit road. But, you know, go back and think about India a few years ago where they decided, okay, Kyle made a decision, okay, it's time to race. They ended up getting in a wreck. They got over that, okay. I think that they're all in the right place. But when you start competing for a championship in this format where you have to go three race segments, you know, all that. I think the pressure mounts. I think it becomes harder to be a good teammate in those situations. It will be tested. But so far they've handled it very well.
Well, you drove for him. Is Coach the perfect guy to manage this?
Absolutely. I wrote down here, but what Coach Gibbs is so good at, people. He understands. He gets the right people to surround these drivers and put them in the best situation to succeed. He lets them do their thing on the track until he needs to interfere, and he's not afraid to do that. But he lets it go a long way before that's going to happen. And what we saw in those sound bites right there are a couple of things. One's not shocking. That Martin Truex Jr. is a great road racer, and he won again there. The other side that we saw is something that we have not seen. I don't know if I've ever seen it, and that is Kyle Busch being rather gracious, finishing second. and you know, I don't know what that said. You ask, can they succeed at this? Here's what it's going to take. Martin Truex Jr. can, and this isn't anything against Kyle Busch. It's just his makeup and him as a competitor. As long as he has enough wins to stay there kind of even. If Truex starts getting ahead in that category and things aren't going as well for him, then the friction's going to heat up a little bit.
It was almost like Kyle was resorting to second because it was Sonoma. Like his first line was, well, he's a better road course racer than me.
Right.
Well, we'll see Chicago this week if the roles stay that same, if he'll be as gracious.
But some of that driver's getting along, and you may not want to hear this, but falls on crew chief's shoulders.
Yeah,
Because
no
if the crew chiefs can keep the teams lined up, because you know what happens, right?
Yeah.
Something happens on the track, and then your team guys are like, they start chirping, right?
Yeah.
And then the team, it starts this thing in between the two teams. And the more the teams, every person on those teams can be lined up with Joe Gibbs Racing, the less chance you will have an altercation. And the crew chiefs can squash it. When you have people on a team that start to stir the pot, the crew chiefs got to step in and say, we're not doing this. That's the only way it's going to work.
In 2007, that moment was the first ever COT race at Martinsville. We unloaded with the 24, and we were really, really good, and the 48 was not. Chad and I sat down. The 48 copied our setup, and they beat us. It's the famous Jeff beating on Jimmy's bumper for the closing 25 laps. And that, to your point, that was the small crack in the armor. That's where the two teams, and we didn't know it at the moment, but looking back, we did. That was the moment that the people that worked on one car weren't so happy for the other car because they felt like they had helped him too much. And I'm with you. Joe Gibbs Racing is so good. I think coach is the perfect guy to manage it, but it's going to become difficult. So the only follow-up question I have to that is where's the rest of Joe Gibbs Racing? Danny Hamlin's won 2 races, okay. Eric Jones is still there. They ran great on Sunday. All the Toyotas did. Do you think we're going to see more out of those other 2 cars?
I think we're better.
That was my polite way of asking.
And so this is the way that, we talk about Joe Gibbs. Is he the man for it? What a great problem to have is managing your drivers outrunning each other. And you can see with the wins exactly what's taking place there and what's going to have to continue. Of course, he's got 3 of them that are in the playoffs already. So his man, is Eric Jones down there trying to get him on a more consistent basis. He's been in the top 10, except when I put him in my fantasy, and then it goes all to hell. But anyway, he's having a good season running-wise if he can just stay away from the problems.
And that's where leadership steps in, too. And you have to. So what's so hard about a multi-car team is when you have something that's working for 2 or 3 and it's not working for the other, it's hard to change things to help that other one. And that's where multi-car teams, if it's a single-car team, you can cater your team around your driver and your crew chief. And what do we have to do to be good with this team? But when it's 4, how do you change stuff to make it so that other team is as good? That gets really, really difficult to do. I was Kevin Harvick's teammate, and Kevin Harvick was so good that the company had to do things to make sure he had the best chance to win. And the company, and rightfully so, says, hey, man, it's working for him. You need to find a way to make it work. And that's where every team has it. Every team has it, where you have talented drivers, talented crew chiefs, talented engineers, but somebody's getting more out of it. How do you make it work for everybody? It's extremely difficult for a team to do. Eric Jones can drive race cars.
Oh, absolutely.
I have no concern about Eric Jones being able to drive race cars and win races at the cup level. I have no concern about that. I believe he can. It's about getting, and I'm not saying he doesn't have to go to keep people. It's about getting everything working, and Eric Jones can win races.
Yeah, man, he did his job yesterday. He ran 8th. But you're 4th in your company out of 4 cars. So that makes things look a little more difficult. But again, I believe in his talent, and hopefully it works for him that he takes advantage of a couple of these weekends where they've been really, really good, and they'll have more of those.
Hey, Motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.